One of our first steps in any 3D project is to create models to work with, characters, environments, and props. Let's take a look at how to get started building a model in Maya. One of the quickest ways to begin building a model is to use a basic shape. In Maya, these are called primitives. To access these primitives, we can go to the Create menu, and let's concentrate on polygon primitives. You can see here that there are a number of primitives listed: sphere, cube, cylinder, and so on. We can also access these primitives via the Polygon Shelf, where you see those here. To bring one of these primitives into our scene, we'll simply click on the particular shape that we want to start with. To frame up on this object, to make it a little bit bigger in our scene, we're going to hit the F key to frame selected. Now we can orbit around our model and get a nice close view of it. We can change how our primitive is constructed by coming over to the channel box. Under the inputs, we'll find the polycube node in this case. You can see here we can change the width by selecting the name there and then middle mouse dragging in the viewport. Or we can change the height or depth to get a shape closer to what we want to start with. We can also change the subdivisions. So we can add more resolution in any of the three axes. Think of each intersection that you see here as a place where we can change the shape of our model. Right now, though, we're in object mode, so we can't actually change the shape. We can scale it, we can change the width and height, but it's always going to have that sort of square shape. But we can move it around our scene using the transform tools. To access those, we come over to the toolbox. If I click on this one, you can see this is the Move tool. It brings up a gizmo that allows me to move this cube around our scene. You can choose to move it in a particular axis, or we can grab it and move it around that way. The hotkey for Move is W. We can also rotate. Okay, the hotkey for that is E. And then the hotkey for scaling is R. And again, we can choose a particular axis by clicking on that particular color, which corresponds to the axes down here. But right now we're still in object mode, and so we can't really go in and start to move any of the different components. So we need to go into component mode to do that. There are several ways that we can go into component mode. One way would simply be to right-click on our model and choose a component to be able to select. For polygons, there's three different components that you need to know: edges, vertex or vertices for the plural, and faces. So let's go into component mode by choosing vertex. This will allow us to choose those particular points. If you want to exit one of your transform tools and go back to select, you can hit the Q key on your keyboard. Each one of these points represents a point in 3D space, whereas each one of these edges represents a straight line between two of those points. The faces are the actual visible geometry created by at least three of those edges. To go back to object mode, we can come up here and click these buttons. These will toggle between object mode and component mode. We can also use F8 on our keyboard to toggle back and forth. Alternatively, we can use the modeling toolkit to do our selections. On the upper right-hand side, you'll see a Show Hide Modeling Toolkit button. Let's hit that, and that'll bring up our modeling toolkit. There are hotkeys for each one of these different kinds of selections. So if you'd like to go directly to a vertex selection, you can hit F9 on your keyboard. If you'd like to go to an edge selection, F10 will take you there. And then for faces, you can use F11. We also can turn on multi-component, which will allow us to choose any of those components without having to switch around. Okay, so once we've got the ability to select a component, then we can use our transform tools to begin shaping this model. So I can grab a point and start to move this around. So we can actually start to change the shape of our geometry to get us closer to what we want. Now that we've taken a look at a basic shape, let's take a look at a more practical example. I'm going to go back to the channel box and layer editor and turn on the ship display. That's a little bit large, so I'm just going to hit the F8 key to frame the selection. Let's move around to the back and we'll see we have some raw geometry at the back that I'd like to turn into some sort of an engine. I'll select that particular piece of geometry and hit F again so that we can have a little bit more predictable orbit around it. I'd like to create a little bit of an inset, and you can see this is just basically a cube shape, but I want to create kind of a rim and more of a mechanical inset here for the engine. To do that, first we'll select the faces. So I'll just right click, go to faces, click on one face, and then shift click on the rest of the faces that I want to select. The next thing we'll do is activate a tool called Extrude, and Extrude is going to be a tool, if you're polygon modeling, you're going to be using a lot, and there are several places where we can access this. In the modeling toolkit, you'll find Extrude right here under components. So if I hit Extrude, you can see the in-view editor comes up, and it'll allow us to change things like the thickness, which you can see pulls that extrude out. In this case, that's not what we want to do, so we'll set that back to 0. What we want to do is change the offset, and you can see that just pulls those faces in and creates kind of a rim around that geometry of new faces. Okay, we also have an option for keep faces together. You can see I can toggle between that. Having that on allows us to treat this face selection as one piece, which is what we want. Now that we've extruded, I want to push these new faces in. So let's repeat that action. We can do that by hitting the G key on our keyboard. Now a new extrude has happened, and now we can use that thickness slider to push that geometry back into the surface. Let's deselect our object. You can also find many of these modeling tools under the Mesh, Edit Mesh, and Mesh Tools menus. So check those out. You can see here's Extrude, and Control E is the hotkey for that as well. The modeling toolkit, though, is a great way to have a lot of the commonly used tools at your disposal as you're using them. One of the common things that we're going to want to do as we go back to object mode is to create smoothed models. It's very easy in Maya. We'll just hit the 3 key to create a smooth mesh preview. That shows us what this will look like as a smoothed model. Looks pretty good, but I want to sharpen up some of the corners. To see the low poly cage, we'll hit 1 on our keyboard, and if you'd like to see both versions at the same time, you can hit the 2 key on your keyboard. Now, in order to sharpen up edges on a smooth model like this, what we'll want to do is add edge loops. To do that, we can either use the Insert Edge Loop tool, or we can use the Multicut tool. You can see Multicut here. You can also access it by coming up here and accessing it from this shelf. Now the Multicut has a variety of options, and you can see what hotkey will do what by coming down all the way down to the bottom of the modeling toolkit and looking at this keyboard mouse shortcuts. So the Multicut tool will allow you to do the work of a lot of different kinds of tools. In this case, though, we want to add edge loops. So in order to add an edge loop, we'll use the Control key. Let's sharpen up some of these edges by hitting Control, and you can see we get a preview here of where that edge is going to be placed. So let's place an edge there and here, and let's also place a few edges kind of going this way. Let's go back to object mode and hit 3 on our keyboard to see the difference. Let's see what's happened here. We put a couple of edges right next to this one, so now when we smooth, we get a nice bevel here. Contrast that with the still smooth edge on the back. Also, you can see that this corner has sharpened up because of the edges that we added going this way. So it's very important when you're doing modeling like this to be able to go in and add those edges where you want them to get the look that you want. Let's add a couple more edges here. We'll sharpen up that edge. And then let's go around just like that. And you can see it creates a nice, sharp, mechanical sort of look in contrast to the very soft look that we get down here on the back and also for this particular corner. Now that we've taken a look at modeling, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can start to move our models around our scene by looking at animation.